Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yep. Welcome. Okay, so when I go to share screen.
You want to do it now?
No, after okay, fine, I got it. Okay, friends, welcome to, what is this? This is the fourth, right? The fourth class in our Mishna series. Good to see you all. Welcome. And as I mentioned in our email tonight, we're going to look at the final Mishnah of Tractate Taanit or Taanit, which deals with fast days in Jewish law. So it also deals with Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, the saddest day in the Jewish year, which is this Thursday. But the final Mishnah deals with happy events. Which we're going to look at. All right, so let's go straight to the text and begin our journey. What I forgot. Okay. Now, again, how do we just... Okay. All right, let's begin. So we'll read the English. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, now before we even tell you what he said, let's talk about Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. The fact that he's the author of this mission is significant, of course. And just a little bit of history. He was the leader of the spiritual leader of the Jewish people at that time, during his time. And he was the sole survivor of the fall of the city of Beitar. One of the many tragedies that occurred on the 9th of Av, we won't go through the list now. We did on a previous occasion, I think on Friday, right? Was the fact that Beitar, this stronghold, and that held out against the Romans, led by Bar Kokhba, this great Jewish leader, great Jewish general, warrior, about whom Rabbi Akiva, the great sage, believed he was the Mashiach. He had all the qualifications. He was a descendant of King David, and he was waging these victorious battles against the Romans, who were considering abandoning Israel. And that would have meant then the rebuilding of the third temple, and Rabbi Akiva and the sages hoped this was the pre-Messianic era. It wasn't to be. Without going into the whole story here, but through an act of treachery, the Romans were able to, through an underground aqueduct, get into the city of Beitar and slew everyone. The only survivor was this Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Just to tell you about the city of Beitar, from Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's own testimony, he says, this gives us an idea of Beitar's immense population and the presence of Torah study. He testified that there were 500 yeshivas in Beitar. The smallest yeshiva comprised of at least 500 students. So there were at least 250 students studying in the yeshivas in Beitar, and they were all massacred on the 9th of Av, some 50 years after the destruction of the Second Temple under Roman occupation. The only survivor is this Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. So he said, there were no days of joy in Israel greater than the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. Right, the 15th of Av is 6 days after Tisha B'Av. And Yom Kippur, we know what Yom Kippur is. So he says there was no days of joy in Israel greater than the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. Before we address the 15th of Av, you might be wondering, Yom Kippur, days of joy in Israel? The answer is yes. What greater joy could there be than atonement, forgiveness, and renewal? Yom Kippur was the day when Moses came down Mount Sinai after having been there for 3 40-day periods. And the final 40-day period ended Yom Kippur. He came down holding the second set of commandments and the news to the people that God had forgiven them. Ever since Yom Kippur was established as a day of atonement. So no greater joy than cleansing and rebirth and atonement and forgiveness. But what about the 15th of Av? So the Talmud, addressing this Mishna, lists a series of events that occurred recurringly on the 15th of Av, which we're not going to right now, but upon examination, I just share this with you. All of them are the reconciliation of the tragedies of Tisha B'Av, or they set in motion at least the process by which Tisha B'Av, the tragedy of Jewish suffering, the destruction of the Second Temple, they set in motion the means by which all this will be healed. So that's the 15th of Av. Again, a whole series of events. Since we mentioned Beitar, it's one of the tragedies of Tisha B'Av. It's one of the tragedies of Tisha B'Av is the fall of Beitar. What happened was that the Roman was beyond the general. There was a term for this. Andrius, the consul general, the one appointed by Caesar, control and in charge of all of Israel, he led these armies, these massive armies, against Bar Kokhba and his men and slaughtered them all eventually. Again, as I told you, through an act of treachery, caught them by surprise, an act of betrayal. He so gloated over the victory, over the slain, which historians estimate as in excess of 500,000, or perhaps much more than that even, that he forbade their burial. The slain of Beitar were not buried. And moreover, gloating over the victory, he instructed that all of the corpses be transported to a large vineyard he had in Israel. There was 18 mil by 18 mil. Now, a mil is somewhat less than a mile, but not much. So it's 18 by 18. It's a huge vineyard. And the bodies were piled one on the other as a fence around his vineyard. But the miracle was, friends, that the bodies did not decay. And only after his death were they allowed to be brought to burial. And that day that he died and they were brought to burial was the 15th of Av. So there in some way is the closure or the healing of the tragedy of the 9th of Av. On the 15th of Av, on the 9th of Av, Beitar is destroyed. Years later, on the 15th of Av, the martyrs are brought to a Jewish burial. That event, friends, was so significant and is so significant in our history that the sages added another blessing to our grace after meals, which begins with the words, the final blessing. We praise God for being good, who is good and does good. The meaning of this double expression is good. We're thanking God that the bodies did not decay and rot. Who does good, that they were brought to a dignified Jewish burial. So significant again that that's the fourth and concluding blessing of our now, the ritual of the grace after meals that Jews have been saying now for some 2,000 years. At any rate, let's go back to the Mishnah. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said, again, he's a survivor of Beitar, the sole survivor. There were no days of joy in Israel greater than the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. I just mentioned one event of the 15th of Av, the burial of the dead of Beitar, but there were many other events throughout history, and they all counter and balance somehow and conclude or set in motion the ultimate healing of the tragedy of the 9th of Av. And Yom Kippur. Let's continue. On these days, the daughters of Jerusalem would go out in borrowed white garments in order not to shame anyone who had none. Let's just address that sentence for a moment. So as we'll see, no, I'm so sorry. Okay, oh, good. As we'll see in a moment, and as I wrote to you, why would they go out? They go out to the vineyards and they would dance, as you will presently describe. And the young men would go out, and this was the great, it wasn't matchmaking, they actually met each other directly. The great, there's a word for it, escapes me, maybe someone can tell me. The great meeting of young men and women for the purpose of marriage. So, why Yom Kippur? Just to address that for a moment, and why the 15th of Av? What the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur share in common is healing where there had been division, fracture, shatteredness, brokenness, separation. The 15th of Av is just described in one of the events, and Yom Kippur, sin separates us from God. Teshuvah and forgiveness reunites us. That's what a marriage is. A marriage is really two souls that were once one in heaven, then come down to the world in separate bodies and separate genders. And by divine design and assistance, find each other. So it's reunion, reconciliation of something that was once one, separated, and now reunited. Like Yom Kippur, prior to the sin, we're connected. The sin severs us, God forbid, puts up a barrier, and teshuvah and atonement reconnects. That's exactly what marriage is. But imagine, friends, Yom Kippur would be the day when they would meet, boy and girl. That tells us so much about the sanctity of marriage. And that marriage is really a connection of souls, a union, a reunion of souls, which embraces even the body in this ultimate oneness. So what better day to meet than Yom Kippur, the most soulful day of the year? What better day to meet your soulmate than Yom Kippur? I should point out that during the period the Mishna is describing, they didn't have the Yom Kippur service as we have it today, because much of the Yom Kippur service, for that matter, every daily service, is in lieu of and in place of the service in the temple. This describes a period during the temple. And so people were not in synagogue all day necessarily, in prayer. The formal prayer we have today hadn't been composed. That was composed only after the temple's destruction. This describes pre-temple destruction. So all to say that this holy, soulful day was the day when souls should find each other. What better day than when the soul is expressed in the eyes, and day of sanctity and holiness and transcendence. And likewise, the 15th of Av, which we didn't really develop, we just mentioned one event, but the 15th of Av is this deep, deep seeds of reconnection after the house is destroyed, the home is destroyed, and husband and wife, it's God and the Jewish people, separate, at least overtly separate. So they would go out, we just read, in borrowed white garments, again, in order not to shame anyone who had none. Incredible message right there. No girl should feel inferior to any other because of social status or financial status. Everybody is borrowing a garment from somebody else, and the Talmud goes into detail as to how that actually worked. Perhaps we'll have a chance to see that. All these garments required immersion. And this ties into our discussion of the previous weeks. The temple stood the laws of purity and impurity applied. And so clothing can become ritually impure, worn by someone, male or female, who is in a state of ritual impurity, like menstruation. So not everybody is careful to wear different garments, or after having worn those garments with the onset of menstruation, then later to immerse them in a mikveh. Nobody did that because it wasn't required by law. So to have a standard that everybody would be comfortable with, no matter who this girl was or what family she came from, Kohanim, priests who lived in a state of constant purity, everybody immersed these garments, and then they borrowed and lent to each other. Again, the idea of equality, also hinted to here, the idea of purity. Why are they wearing these garments? They're going out, as we'll see, to dance in the vineyards. Wine is symbolic of joy. Wine is symbolic of secrets coming out. Actually, not symbolic, that's what it does. Nichnas yayin yetzesod. Wine goes in and the secrets come out, that which is hidden. So too, marriage is the revelation of the soul, the completion of the soul, previously hidden, and now they find each other. All of the symbolism here. And it's all done in purity, hence their garments are immersed, because this is first and foremost a meeting of souls, which is the essence of marriage. So the daughter of Jerusalem would come out and dance in the vineyards. We just explained now the significance of the vineyard, the wine, symbolic of simcha in general, but especially marriage. Hence the wine under the chuppah and so on. What would they say? Young man, lift up your eyes and see what you choose for yourself. Do not set your eyes on beauty, but set your eyes on the family. Grace is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman that fears the Lord, she shall be praised. And it further says in the book of Proverbs, give her of the fruit of her hands and let her works praise her in the gates, something that every husband, every male says Friday night, one of the verses in the Eshet Chaya, woman of valor, before he makes Kiddush. All right, we're not going to analyze this last part yet, because now we're going to look at a Breita, right? This word Breita, at the end of the tractate. We mentioned this in our first lesson. There's Mishna and there's Breita. The Mishna, the teachings that Rabbi Yehuda the Prince collected from all the teachings of the sages and canonized and formalized in 6 orders, all Jewish law. But there were many other teachings not included in this formal text, and they're called Breita. They tend to be more elaborate, and they bring other opinions, and they augment the Mishnah. So the Talmud always brings to bear in its analysis of a Mishnah all the related Breises, teachings of the sages of that same epoch that were left and recorded in separate bodies and groups, but not part of the formal, very succinct and very brief and seminal Mishnah. So what does the Breisa say? The Breisa elaborates. Let's look at it. The Mishnah taught the English here is somewhat a little bit strange, but something is missing here. So we must have corrupted. They'd go out anyway in white clothes, and on the 15th of Av, they'd go out to the vineyards and dance. Okay. The sages taught this tradition in greater detail. The borrowing, which we mentioned, right, just now and earlier. The daughter of the king borrows white garments from the daughter of the high priest. The daughter of the high priest borrows from the daughter of the deputy high priest, all borrowing lower. The daughter of the deputy high priest borrowed lower in terms of, the hierarchy. From the daughter of the priest anointed for war. Who is that? That is to say, the priest would read verses of Torah and address the army as they prepared for battle. That's a lesser level of priest. That's less than the deputy, who is less than the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and it continues down the line. The daughter of the priest anointed for war borrows, can you follow the arrow there, from the daughter of a common priest, and all the Jewish people borrow from each other. Why would they borrow garments? They did so as not to embarrass one who did not have their own white garments. That's more elaboration in how the borrowing went. All right. I'm trying to get, I see. Okay. Now we continue. Some more detail. The Mishnah further taught all the garments that the women borrowed required immersion, as those who previously wore them before might have been ritually impure and not purified them. And maybe this girl wants to wear only purified garments. So across the board, they are all immersed in a mikveh. More detail, the Mishnah said. Now the Brisa adds detail. Rabbi Elazar says, even if the garments were folded and placed in a box, as indication they had not been touched for a long time, they nevertheless required ritual immersion before being worn. Again, the idea being no exceptions. The Mishnah also stated the daughters of the Jewish people would go out and dance in the vineyards. A Taanit taught, a sage taught, one who did not have a wife would turn there to find one. Now we come to the part I wish to focus on. Whereas the Mishnah, friends, spoke in general terms, the daughters of Jerusalem or the daughters of Israel, the Brisa, which we're looking at now, tells us in greater detail as we zero in to this, as I wrote, magical, mystical moment. There were three categories of girls, and he said three different things. It is taught that those women of distinguished, see where I'm pointing here, lineage among them would say, all right, so they come from Yichus. Young man, please lift up your eyes and see what you choose for yourself. So the sages taught this practice in greater detail in this Brisa, and that goes as follows. Okay, so the first quote here was from the Mishnah. Now we're going into greater detail. And now we're identifying three groups. What would the beautiful women among them say? Set your eyes. I'm sorry. Set your eyes towards beauty, as a wife is only for beauty. What would those of distinguished lineage among them say? So we're getting greater detail. Set your eyes towards family, as a wife is only for children. And the children of a wife from a distinguished family will inherit her lineage. What would the ugly ones among them say? Acquire your purchase for the sake of heaven, provided you adorn us with golden jewelry after our marriage to beautify us. And it's this, my dear friends, that I want to focus on, these three categories. What are the categories? The categories are beauty, family, and then, as the Mishnah or the translation has it here, the comely ones, the quote-unquote ugly ones. So, dear friends, we just finished saying that this happened on Yom Kippur. And on the 15th of Av, let's just appreciate Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. The holiest day of the year. Is it possible that she would say, and that this would be a virtue, that beauty, a wife is only for beauty? Can this possibly mean just physical beauty? The answer is no. Moreover, those of distinguished lineage, family, what would they say? Look to family as a wife is only for children? Is this suggesting, God forbid, that if a marriage is not blessed with children, then the marriage is not sacred a sacred union? The answer is, it is a sacred union. And God forbid to suggest that her value is not inherent, but only to have children. So obviously, we need to probe deeper in understanding this category and who she is and what she's saying. In the same way that obviously we don't speak of just physical beauty alone. For as we had seen in the quote from the Mishna, which we say in the Woman of Valor Friday night, Sheker achein v'hevel hayofi. Beauty alone is false. Grace is false, and beauty per se is empty. So the beauty being discussed here clearly is not what meets the eye. And likewise, the second statement, set your eyes towards family, for she's only for children, does not mean, God forbid, to dismiss her intrinsic value. So that we're going to explain now. What is beauty and what is children spiritually? And the ugly ones would say, acquire or purchase for the sake of heaven. What are they saying? Look to heaven and then marry us? What kind of marriage would this be? And then the condition, adorn us with gold and jewelry. So that's equally puzzling. I hope you agree that the third category is equally as puzzling as the first two. So now, dear friends, I'm going to share with you in the light of Chassidus, as the Rebbe explains in one of his many talks on this Mishnah, the spiritual significance of these categories of dancing maidens in the vineyards of Jerusalem. Friends, on a deeper symbolic level, marriage. Let's actually posit this. Why is there marriage here in this world? It's a crazy idea. One person forever. And the whole world has been struggling with it, since time immemorial. I don't have to tell you that the rate of successful marriages decreases with each passing day. So why do we even try? Because it's a sacred, godly union. And it's ultimately a reflection of our relationship with God. God is the divine groom, and each one of us is the divine bride. Incidentally, what this is saying is that human beings are fundamentally, everybody, female. We're all, male or female, the divine bride. The embryo is initially female. The male chromosomes only emerge later, after conception. That's also true spiritually. It's true physically because it's true spiritually. In our spiritual relationship with God, we are the feminine and God is the male. This description here, friends, of these three categories of maidens represent three spiritual categories within the Jewish people. And what are they? As we all know, friends, one of the primary commandments and components of our relationship with God, just like a marriage, is love. It's the first thing we learn. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, God our Lord, God is one. And then, after that line, Baruch Shem, we then continue the quotation from Scripture, this week's Parsha, V'yahavta et Hashem Elokecha, you shall love God your Lord. Love is the fuel for connection. Because you love, you want to be close, you want to give, and you want to be one with the object of your love. So friends, there's two categories of love as taught in Chassidus, two kinds of love. There is the first level, the highest level of love, as it were, and that is a love that is born from deep appreciation and meditation. You get to know this person, in terms of human relationships. And the more you get to know them, the more you begin to appreciate, love, desire them, and want to be close and share your life with this person. So this is a love that comes a result of being familiar, understanding, appreciating. Likewise with God, this is a love of God that is born of a deep understanding and appreciation of the reality of God, looking at nature and seeing the incredible wisdom, complexity, the tenderness in nature, the fury in nature, the grandeur in nature, the minuscule and microscopic components that make up nature. Science in all of its complexity is all there ultimately for us to have a glimpse of and appreciate the profound divine creator and artist of this complex and beautiful world, integrated world. Everything is integrated, united, it's all complex, it's all one, pulsating with life. Science is convinced that there's a unifying principle because there is. That's the divine. So the more one appreciates in nature and then looking even beyond nature, meditating upon God's attributes, his revelations, his divine names, the spiritual worlds, and so on, the deeper the love, the deeper the desire to connect, to serve, to be one. It's kind of classic love. It's a love that's born as a result of understanding. And that, by the way, answers a very simple, or rather a very glaring question. Simple and glaring. We're commanded to love God, as we just quoted, but how can you command love? Either I love you or I don't. With the best of intentions, and I want to fulfill whatever you tell me, I can't love you if I don't already. Your commandment is not going to make an iota of difference. When it comes to actual behavior, you asked me to do something which I haven't done before, and I can do it immediately if I want to. Action is something that we can all do, but feelings in the heart you can't just summon, even out of a desire to be obedient. So how does God command you shall love? But the answer is what we just shared moments ago. The commandment is, in fact, to learn and get to know God so that will engender love. That's the commandment. That's why the Shema, that line, God, our Lord, God is one, is the line that precedes the commandment to love him, because in those words, there's profound meditations and insight about God's essence and infinite and finite manifestations, entire volumes, literally, in Kabbalah and in all the classics works of Judaism are written on that very sentence. And it's all there, all these meditations, to inspire us to want to connect, to invoke, nurture a desire for union. So that's the meaning of "and you shall love." It means, and you shall meditate on that, on truth, which will bring you to love. That's one level of love. That's the highest level. Let's call the person who achieves that successfully the tzaddik, the righteous person. Now, this person is going to be righteous. I'll tell you why. Because if one truly loves God, and you can't love anything else. The heart cannot contain opposite loves. So if we love spirituality and we truly love Yiddishkeit and we love God, then we're simply not attracted to materialism and repulsed certainly by sin, by anything that would sever that connection or compromise it. So the one who has truly developed this love is righteous, going to be righteous, meaning to say that their behavior is going to be, their whole life, their heart is filled with love for God, loyalty in every aspect of their life. So level one is the tzaddik, and that's the beauty we speak of here. The maiden who is beautiful, spiritually represents the one who has expressed through profound intellect and emotion all of the actualized all of these wonderful, beautiful qualities that God has blessed us with, using our mind to meditate and appreciate truth and the divine, the beauty of Torah, the heart is overflowing with love. This is a beautiful person. What's a beautiful person? A person who has engaged and actualized every aspect of his or her persona to serve God in truth. That's the tzaddik. That's the ideal. But the reality is, friends, not all of us have yet achieved that. Not all of us are blessed even with a profound and prodigious intellect that can meditate on the greatness of God, seeing him in nature and in science or in the spiritual realms. Not everybody's blessed with that kind of penetrating and analytical mind, a mind open to the mystery of life and able to discover and discern it and internalize it in growing and deepening measure. So what is it then left for those, and many, that to whatever degree are not capable of this kind of manifested beauty, mind and heart filled with divine, rapturously in love, deeply understanding, focused exclusively on one's soulmate. And I'm speaking on two levels here, marriage and with God, paralleling a relationship with God. So what's then left, as it were, for those of us not capable of this kind of experience? The answer is, friends, that every one of us is born with an innate love for God. We are born with it because we inherit it from our mothers and fathers who inherited it from their parents. It all begins with Abraham. It's a familial thing. See where I'm going with this now? Friends, this is the second category. Family. We all have an instinctual and natural love. And where does it manifest? Friends, it's manifest when we're put up against the wall and we're told, and over the millennia, this is how Jews behaved. So they responded when given the choice to bow down to the cross or die, deny your Jewishness, or give up your life. Jews overwhelmingly chose to give up their lives rather than betray their Jewishness, their Jewish identity, and their people. Where does this come from? I'm not talking about the beautiful ones, the beautiful people. We mean they're spiritually, not physically at all. So where does it come from? I'm not talking about scholars imbued with knowledge and understanding and hearts overflowing with love for God and love for Yiddishkeit and love for their fellow Jew and love for humanity. They're not tzaddikim. They're not righteous and saintly. And yet ordinary Jews, simple Jews, have given up their life rather than betray and deny their God and their people. Where does this come from? The answer is family. Because we all inherit this instinctual bond, this instinctual love. Like a child instinctively loves his or her parents, not because the child understands her parents or his parents. It's in the DNA. And that's the meaning, friends, which we were puzzled with. For a wife is only for children. What is meant by children here? We're not talking about physical children. Children means the things we produce, the things we do, our actions. What this is saying, what the second category is saying is, dear God, he says, well, here we're talking about souls talking to God. So the second category is saying, dear God, we don't have this rapturous, beautiful love of the righteous, but we're in touch with our instinctual love. And we produce the children. We do the mitzvahs. We do the mitzvahs. We're observant of your Shabbos, and we keep kosher. Are we deeply inspired? Is it beautiful? Are we always in the mood? Do we love what we're doing? Do we understand always what we're doing? No. But we are in touch with our deep instinct, with the natural instinctual love, which we inherit by virtue of the fact that we're Jewish, and we produce the children. Children means the mitzvahs that we do. So, dear God, take us into your embrace. For though we lack the beauty of the righteous, the saintly, we perform the mitzvahs. For a wife is only for children means, at the end of the day, dear God, this category says to God, the bottom line is the performance of mitzvahs. We do them. True, we don't do them out of necessarily a deep understanding and love. Sometimes it's a struggle. Often it's a struggle. But we draw on our Jewishness, on that instinctual, I am Jewish, and that motivates us to do the mitzvahs, symbolically the children, and therefore, dear God, embrace us, make us one with you, right? This is all in the context of marriage, which ultimately is one and one equals one. Union as one dissolves into the other. Then, my friends, there's the third category. What would the ugly ones among them say? So we mean that now we're seeing, appreciating, this is all meant spiritually. So what does ugly mean? Ugly means we're not even in touch with our instinctual Jewishness, that if we were, we would always do the right thing. That's concealed and covered within us. And on occasion, or perhaps even frequently, we don't fulfill your will. We transgress. We stain our soul. That's the meaning of ugly here. It's meant spiritually, and it's a third category. And to use a very simple term to describe this, we are sinners. The first category are pious and righteous and saintly. The second category are loyal. But the third category transgresses. So we say to God, acquire your purchase for the sake of heaven. What are we saying to God? We're still Jewish. And you, dear God, can see into the depth of our soul that we really, really do want to be connected to you, to be held in your embrace. We have an evil inclination. We're dealing with a world of temptation and distraction, and we can't seem to always hold it together. But acquire your purchase, as it were, for the sake of heaven. We're telling God, look deeply into us. And you will see that deep down we are loyal. And provide us with golden jewelry. We know what that means, friends, spiritually. See, the Talmud has this beautiful statement to say, which I don't have in the text. The Talmud says, all Jewish women are beautiful. And it means this physically and spiritually. It's only exile that sullies us. All Jewish women means all Jewish souls. As we said earlier, we're all the feminine. It's exile. Dear God, we're in exile. Your presence is concealed. We toil and struggle for a living. There are so many distractions and so many tests. We have suffered so much. So we have become tainted. We have acquired some of the impurities of our surroundings. But adorn us with golden jewelry. You know what that means? Dear God, inspire us, and you'll see how we will respond. The golden jewelry is symbolic of God showering us with his presence. Show us your face. Inspire us, send inspiration somehow our way. And you will see how even we, who had somehow got mired and enmeshed in materialism and hedonism, how that spark will respond. Acquire your purchase for the sake of heaven. See into the depth of our soul. Adorn us with golden jewelry. Inspire us, and you will see that we will respond. We will respond and connect to our innate love, and who knows, even perhaps become the third level, the level of spiritual beauty, the righteous, the saintly. So friends, these are the three levels. And in summary, the beautiful ones, again, we're talking about each one of us, and each one of you listening will decide which category you are. I know which one I am. It's not the first, nor the second. So the first is the saintly, the beautiful. What is beautiful? Beautiful means actualizing and expressing the talent that the soul has. And the soul has the ability to understand and to feel. This is a love born of being intimate, of understanding, ever deepening. A love born by the understanding of the mind and heart in harmonious oneness. The understanding moves and stirs the heart. The second category, family. This is the Jew who's not capable or hasn't generated this kind of understanding and feeling in the heart, but nonetheless, there's the inherited feeling. There's the innate feeling that we all inherit by virtue of the fact that we're Jewish. And the second category is in touch with this. Let me elaborate a little bit on the second category, because a whole section of Tanya is devoted to this. Tanya, the classic work of Chassidus. This is a Jew who realizes that if I would be given the choice, deny my Jewishness or give up my life, I'd give up my life. Well, really, every choice I face in life, in essence, is betray God or acknowledge Him. So with this clarity, the person connects consciously to their innate love and remains forever loyal. That's the children producing the mitzvahs. The third category, again, sullied, tainted by transgression because of exile, but still calling out to God and saying that deep down, even though we don't not always acknowledge it ourselves, but in moments of deep truth, we want to connect to you. That's all we want. We want the emes. We want you to be proud of us. And we want your desire, which is you desire a relationship with us. We want to give that to you. Help us, adorn us, prompt us, golden jewelry, inspiration. Let us see glimpses of your presence. Send us our way, those that would lift us and inspire us. That's the golden jewelry. It glitters and sparkles. And you will see how that spark within us, dormant as it may be, will burst into glorious flame. Significantly, friends, the Mishnah begins with the beautiful ones, then the ones of lineage, of prestige, of family, and concludes with the third category. We have a principle in Torah that we should always conclude with on a positive note. What the Mishnah is telling us is that at the end of the day, the deepest nachas and pleasure that God has is in the third category. The one who is far from perfect. We're full of flaws, and have made mistakes, large and small. We haven't given up on ourselves. We haven't given up on God's desire for a connection to us. And in our imperfection, we call out, we acknowledge our imperfection, and we call out, dear God, we want, help us connect to you. That truly, really comes from the depth of the soul, in a sense, deeper than the previous levels. The first level, it's intellectual and emotional. The second level, it comes from the inherited instinctual love. And the third level is deeper than that. It's the essence. That even transgression and even distraction cannot compromise. The depth of the Jewish soul, that even after we had hurt you, ignored you, betrayed you, we're still Jewish, and we want so deeply to reconnect. That's an expression of the deepest level of the neshama, of the soul, and that's why it's the final teaching of the Mishnah. We're not going down in level on some profound level. We're going deeper and deeper, deeper and deeper into the soul, discovering its incredible depth. That nothing at the end of the day can tear us asunder from Hashem, even our own failures. We need help. We call out for that help, and God will surely do so. At the end of the tractate, which is a beautiful, beautiful part, I'm not going to comment, but we'll just read it together because it's so beautiful. The bold is the actual words of the Talmud, and the not bold is the translator's commentary. The tractate concludes with a statement related to the topic of dancing. Ula, who came from the city of Bir'ah, said that Rabbi Eliezer said, in the future, the end of days of Mashiach will come. The Holy One, blessed be He, will arrange a dance of the righteous, and then that's everybody, all of us. And He'll be sitting among them in paradise, and each and every one of the righteous, it's every Jew, will point to God with his finger, as it were. And that's symbolic. It means God's presence will be so real, he can point to it. And as the verse says in Isaiah, it shall be said on that day, who shall say it? We, each one of us. We quote this quotation, Simchas Torah night, before we dance at the Torahs. Simchas Torah being the culmination of the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. This is the verse we quote, or one of them. Behold, this is our God for whom we waited, that He might save us. This is the Lord for whom we waited. We will be glad and rejoice in His salvation. The commentary adds, God will be revealed so that every righteous individual, but again, it's every one of us who then will be, because we will have done teshuvah, as we all are doing and will do. So each one of us will be able to say, this is our God, as though they were pointing at Him with a finger, which implies this intimate, close, and real connection. May we merit that wonderful day, that wonderful, great, glorious dance without delay, so that Tisha B'Av will no longer be a day of fasting and mourning, but will be the day of greatest celebration. I thank you all for listening. So now, if I can get back to see your faces, I don't know, my son left. Oh, let's try this. What about that? Okay. Obviously, I can see now. Okay, wonderful. I don't see all your faces, but I see all your names. So I'm very happy to see you all. It's wonderful. And God willing, next week, which will be our final Mishnah class in this series, and then we'll see how we proceed from there.